We're diving today into, one of the most contradictory, visually huge artistic periods of the 20th century, Socialist Realism, SR. And really, we have to kick off with these two quotes from the Hungarian poet Lakatos István. They just nail the kind of impossible nature of this whole style.
Yeah, they really do.
Okay, listen to this first one, this paradox. It writes about reality, but it doesn't tell the truth.
Oof, right there.
And then the second one, this is just mind-bending. Poets create a flat plane where every point is the same distance from the center, but it must not be a circle.
Wow. Yeah, an impossible geometry.
Exactly. That's the core conflict, right? This demand for impossible perfection. I mean, for 40 years, SR was the official dominant art style across Central and Eastern Europe.
Absolutely dominating.
And today, well, it's mostly rejected. Younger generations, refined tastes, they just don't connect with it.
Understandably, in many ways.
So our mission here is to really dig into this massive body of work, the good, the bad, the just plain bizarre, figure out how it was enforced, what it actually looked like, and, what it tells us about that whole messy relationship between political power and art.
Yeah, and it's absolutely vital to understand right away that socialist realism wasn't just, art history happening.
It wasn't just a style that emerged organically.
No, exactly. It was a very specific variant of realism, ideologically interpreted, and put quite deliberately straight into the service of Communist Party propaganda.
So state policy dictating art, artistic freedom wasn't really the point.
Not the primary point, no. The party's message came first.
Okay, so let's get into that mandate. How did the Communist parties actually land on this specific style? It didn't just pop up overnight, did it?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, the formal announcement, that was 1934, the first Congress of Soviet Writers. But the groundwork, that had been laid for, over a decade before. Yeah, you had these precursor movements, like the Association of Artists of Revolutionary Russia, and especially Prolet Cult. These groups were already arguing that art needed to be, stripped down, basically, dedicated purely to serving the working class.
So they were paving the way for this kind of ideological takeover of art.
Pretty much, yeah. So by the time you get Gorky, Bukharin, and Zdanov outlining the principles at that 34 Congress, the stage was totally set for, total control.
And this is where they really formalize that definition, creating that central paradox we started with.
Right. And what's fascinating is how specific the language was. Art must, quote, illustrate reality in a revolutionary evolution, in a historically accurate and concrete manner. That's the realism bit.
Okay, sounds pretty straightforward. Historically accurate, concrete, fine. But then comes the catch, the ideological twist.
Exactly. This truth must be combined with the task of ideological transformation and education in the socialist spirit of the workers.
Right. So for you, the listener, imagine being an artist then. You're told, show things accurately as they are, but filter it. Show them as they should become under communism.
Yeah, show the present, but only through the lens of this perfect, glorious future. That mandatory optimism, it had to be there.
So the art itself had to be, partisan. It wasn't neutral.
Not at all. It was rooted completely in the Marxist-Leninist worldview. Partisanship, they called it. The whole point was to visually create and then keep reinforcing this idea of the socialist man in his multilateral development.
Art as a manufacturing tool for the ideal citizen.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's move from the theory to the actual art, the paintings, the sculptures. What did this look like? The aesthetic rules must have been tight.
Incredibly strict. First off, absolutely everything had to be optimistic. Any hint of, sadness, doubt, anything negative, that was basically counter-revolutionary.
And you see that directly in how they showed people, right, the human figures.
Oh, absolutely. Characters had to have these, robust bodies. They had to just exude power. Faces full of this almost superhuman vitality.
Like they never had a bad day.
Never. And their posture, their expressions, it all had to scream faith in the future. Unquestioning faith.
Okay, and this is where the sources make a really interesting, maybe uncomfortable comparison.
Yes. If you look closely at these idealized figures, the muscles, the height, that unwavering stare, they could easily be compared aesthetically to the heroic figures promoted by Nazi Germany.
Wow, that's a big statement. Are we saying the method of state propaganda art is basically the same, whether it's communist or fascist?
Functionally. Often, yes. The goal is similar. Project overwhelming state strength and certainty. It's not about real human complexity or struggle.
It's about conveying that constant, optimistic, motivating message that revolutionary flame that burns constantly, as the source puts it.
Exactly. And this led to a very predictable visual checklist, almost kitschy sometimes.
Yeah, you could probably walk into any gallery back then and tick the boxes, right?
Totally. You'd see the heroic worker, foundry worker, miner, maybe an electrician climbing a pole, the strong peasant woman, often with wheat, the serious intellectual reading, the tractor driver.
And the young pioneer, the scout in the red tie.
Can't forget the pioneer. And the scale often matched the ideological ambition. You have to look at some key Soviet examples.
Like that huge statue.
Yeah, Vera Mukina's The Worker and the Kolkhoz Woman from the 1937 Paris World Exhibition. Massive stainless steel thing. Became a huge state symbol Soviet films used to start with a rotating image of a copy.
And then there was that plan for the Palace of the Soviets. That sounds almost unbelievable.
Oh, it was wild. The competition was in 1931. The winning plan by Iofan was for this symmetrical building 450 meters high.
Just the building?
Well, the building was basically just a pedestal for a
Oh.
separate 70-meter statue of Lenin raising his arm.
70 meters, just for the statue.
70 meters? That Lenin alone would have been about as tall as the Statue of Liberty. It just shows how SR demanded art project power on this colossal scale. A direct visual translation of absolute political authority.
And this wasn't just statues and paintings. This whole ideological push, this grandiosity, it seeped into the cities themselves, into architecture. Stalinist Baroque, they call it.
Right, Stalinist Baroque. It was all about this kind of imitation luxury. Big, heavy, classical-looking buildings, often overloaded with decoration.
Where would you see the clearest example?
Well, the model really was the big waiting halls in Moscow's metro stations. Think dynamic, sort of Baroque-inspired plaster statues, huge glass lampshades trying to look like crystal chandeliers, all underground for the workers.
Projecting state wealth, but supposedly for the people.
That was the idea. And this style got exported everywhere in the Eastern Bloc. You see it in Lomonosov University in Moscow, the University of Warsaw, the huge Casa Skanteia in Bucharest.
Even the People's Stadium in Budapest, right, the one they rebuilt later.
Exactly. That was the original style. It really embedded state power right into the cityscape.
And it didn't stop at visual arts or buildings. It hit literature, too.
Oh, definitely. High culture was absolutely part of it. You had leading authors like Maxim Gorky, Faddeev, Sholokhov.
Sholokhov is the really big name there, right? He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. How did a complex novel like Quiet Dawn fit the SR mold? That seems tricky.
That's a great question. It worked because it managed to show the revolutionary evolution of the Cossacks. It depicted class struggle historically accurately, quote-unquote, but it always guided the reader towards the necessary conclusion, ideological transformation. It showed the past struggles and suffering that were apparently needed to arrive at the socialist present.
So it's that dual thing again. Looks accurate, but pushes the ideology.
Always. And this permeated everything, even just like office decor in government buildings. After World War II, it was mandatory, absolutely mandatory, to have busts of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin everywhere.
Right, the visual reinforcement. You couldn't escape it.
Nope. Statues in public squares, busts in offices, and even the bookshelves had a required look.
Ah, the bookshelves. Uniformly bound books, right? Red or dark brown.
Exactly. Rows and rows of them. And the sources add this little detail.
Let me guess. They looked nice, but didn't get read much.
Bingo. Which were never actually read. It's kind of the perfect metaphor, isn't it? Ideological wallpaper. Appearance over actual engagement.
So this iron grip, this rigid control, did it ever loosen up?
It did, somewhat. Things shifted a bit after Stalin died in '53, and then especially after the 20th Party Congress. That period became known as the Thaw.
The thaw. Okay, so what did that mean for artists?
Well, by the mid-'60s, there was a slight easing. You started to see non-figurative art, maybe some Impressionist or Post-Impressionist influences, cautiously allowed into some exhibitions.
A bit more breathing room?
A little bit.
Yeah.
And state publishers gave slightly more liberal, too. They published things like The Iron Cemetery by Fiches André. So, yeah, a brief window opened up.
But that window didn't stay open everywhere, did it?
No. Romania is a key example here. They had a brief period of openness under Ceausescu, but then came his Mangalia speech in 1973.
And that slammed the window shut again.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A sharp return to the old Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist dogma. Back to basics, you could say.
So that mandatory optimism came roaring back.
Oh, yeah. There's this quote from a philosopher, Ratchaguzin, in '72. He said artists were now expected to show not just the shadows of reality, but definitely its sunny sides. And they had to dream about what communism must become.
That flat plane, that must not be a circle. It was back with a vengeance.
Absolutely. And this led to some really extreme examples of idealization.
Like the paintings of Siesko himself.
Exactly. The source mentions Sabin Balaya, who was undeniably talented, technically, but he did this whole series dedicated to the dictator and his wife.
How did he portray them?
Almost ethereal, like idyllic extraterrestrial beings dressed all in white. It's art as pure state-mandated fantasy.
So when the regimes finally fell, around 1990, what happened to all this public art, the statues, the mosaics?
Well, a lot of it became an immediate target. You saw statues pulled down. Many were collected into these special statue parks, like the one in Budapest. That's where figures like the Soviet officer Ostapenko ended up.
The 20th century version of the statue graveyard that happened to Gothic art during the Renaissance?
It's a very similar historical impulse, yeah. And the legacy today is, well, it's mixed.
How so?
Well, in Erod, for instance, there's this huge mosaic, 525 square meters, called Victory of Socialism. The sources say the execution, the quality, is actually very high, even if the theme was forced. And it's still there.
But other things haven't fared so well.
Definitely not. There's the Victory Fountain in Erod Nu. Used to be a statue of a woman made of artificial stone. Now it's apparently cracked, falling apart, and stuck in front of a car mechanic shop.
Wow. Talk about reflecting the change in status.
Yeah, it really shows the disdain that built up. But then even amidst that, the sources point out other pieces, like a white marble-seated woman in Eminescu Park. Originally, she was a milking woman, very SR theme.
And
Now, apparently, it's still seen as a remarkable work. People admire the quality, regardless of the original context. So it's complicated.
okay, so let's try to synthesize this. Socialist realism. It was basically the art of the perfect state-approved lie, wasn't it?
You could say that. An enforced style across all media, demanding relentless optimism and vitality through this very specific totalitarian aesthetic. And it worked, in a way. It successfully propagated the state's vision for decades.
And what does this whole deep dive teach you, our listener, about today?
Well, I think it shows that the visual language of totalitarian power, those robust bodies, that unwavering faith, the monumental scale, it's a political tool that pops up again and again, regardless of the specific ideology.
It reveals how political power always tries to control representation, tries to make art serve the system, not necessarily the truth.
Exactly. And it really forces us to ask, what happens to this kind of mandated art in the long run? We mentioned the Lenin bust probably sold for scrap, others put in parks like historical curiosities.
Right. But here's a final thought for you to chew on. The sources mention that Veremakina's sculpture, We Want Peace, it was restored in Moscow in 2013 after being hidden away for 20 years.
It's interesting.
So is the fate of rejected propaganda art always the statue graveyard? Or can high-quality execution, even when serving a despised regime, eventually earn some kind of preservation, maybe even reappreciation down the line? Something to think about.